Hey guys, and welcome back to the show. I have another guest this week. Her name is Candy Leigh. Candy, is this how you pronounce your name? How you do you, is there another last name? Tell me about this. Let's just start here.
So my middle name is Leigh, Leigh, and I've loved it my whole life. And so when I decided to start my own business, I decided to go with Candy Leigh instead of using my last name. So it is my middle name.
Perfect. Let's start there. So, welcome back to the show. This is the More Than Mindset podcast and YouTube channel. And we decided to go live today where you would actually be on video because Candy has some really cool stuff going on in her life. We're going to be talking about self-healing masters and the integrative coach approach that Candy has been working through. And I just wanted her to share her experience and also talk about how she's using it to evolve in her life. So just tell us a little bit about you, Candy.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to talk about myself is to say how I came to meet you. So I'm going to just share that journey. So I am a Midwesterner and was a corporate employee for about 20 years. And at the beginning of 2019, I wound up having a back surgery. And after I had that back surgery, I was going through some physical therapy and acupuncture and other things. And when I was at my acupuncturist, I actually wound up being introduced through my acupuncturist to a woman named Peggy. And it was a wonderful experience talking with her. Peggy did some healing Reiki work and other things with me. And through Peggy, I actually came to meet you, Kim, and the whole Self-Healing Masters group. But to add some color and flavor around that, after my back surgery, I went back on my very first day back to work to my corporate career and was laid off on that very first day. And so I spent a little bit of time wondering, what the heck am I going to do? Who am I? I spent 20 years here. This brand is me. I am a part of this. We used to say, I bleed blue because the colors for the company were blue and gold. And it really took me some time to figure out what my next steps in life were going to be. So right after I got laid off, I spent some time really thinking about it and reflecting on that. And so I decided I was going to write a book. I was going to combine my passions of travel and connecting with people and writing. And I was going to basically do my version of what my dream travel blog career might have been. And so I went on a road trip and I started to talk to some people and collect their stories. And that turned into a whole long journey inward of reflection on what my life has been and what my purpose really is. And so I wrote a book about it. And my meeting with Peggy was actually a really integral part of that story and how it came together. So that's a little bit more color around who I am and what my journey has been.
So tell us about your book. What's the basis of the book?
Yeah, so my book is called Finding Life in Between, a journal from me to you. And the idea was that when I was on this road trip, I would be sort of energetically connected to people that I would meet along the way. I mapped out some different milestones and road stops on this week-long journey to somewhere south. I figured I would end up somewhere around the Carolinas. I didn't know for sure. And as I met people at these different stops and I started talking with them about their stories and how did they get to this point in their lives and what brought them to our meeting in that day, what happened was, it would trigger for me other ideas about, oh my gosh, how does that impact me in my life? What are the experiences that I've had that maybe I need to learn from or that others could learn from? And so as I went on this journey, maybe 3 days in, I realized I was writing more about kind of a memoir, like self-help and memoir, as opposed to a journal of connections of other people and what makes us all, connected in this human experience. And I remember calling my publisher and saying, this is not what we agreed to. I don't know if I'm right, if I'm doing this right. I don't know what to do. And she literally said, the moon is in Leo right now. It's a time for reflection. Just go with it and the right thing will happen. So that's kind of how the book came together. And after I wrote it, it just took a couple of weeks to write once I got in that zone. Like the writing came pretty quickly, but it was the editing that took more time. So anybody who's listening, who's thinking about writing a book, it's that editing that's a beast, right? Because that's where you have to really put in and make sure that it's the right product and it's, that's very iterative. But then alongside of that, because the book has a lot of sharp, raw, vulnerable moments included in it, I really had to emotionally get ready to let it go. I was, at one point I thought, forget it. I'm not doing this. This is too much. I'm not doing it. I can't. And a friend of mine literally came to me and we were talking about it. And he said to me, if you can't, people are hungry for the truth right now. Like, you have to tell your truth in this book. 'Cause if you can't tell the truth, then what good are you? And that was kind of a wake up call for me to say, you know what? Yes, there's power in the vulnerability. There's magic in the stories that we all have in all of our truths. And so I went with it. And so that's what the book is about.
Very good. So show us the cover. Like, I see it's behind you.
Yeah, it's behind me here. So here it is.
Here it is. And you can get it on Amazon. I know even I've seen it on your page. You have a Facebook page. Yeah.
Yep. Amazon, Target, Walmart. You can order from any of them right now.
So fun. So Candy came into my world through one of my clients. Her name is Peggy. Peggy's an integrative spirituality coach. And you met Peggy, like you're saying, in your journey. She's part of chapter 3. Yes. If I'm not mistaken, that's the right number. And she introduced you into our community. And that's really, I want to get your take on, because you've been in the coaching world, in the corporate world, a lot of the personal transformation and growth, business growth for over 20 years. What was different for you when Peggy introduced you to this approach, or when you came into Self-Healing Masters? Let's just kind of talk about the integrative approach.
Yeah. So as you were mentioning, I've had coaching experience for 15 to 20 years in the corporate world, and a lot of that has been around sales execs, high producers, and what I realized throughout the course of my coaching with that group in particular, it's a lot of very type A, very driven, usually male-dominated industry. And when I would do coaching, it was always like the muscle and hustle is what I call it, like muscling and hustling through. Like, what's the behavior we need? How are we going to achieve this number? How are we going to make it squeak? Or what are we going to put the reward on? How are we holding each other accountable? And always better, faster, stronger. And that's a great approach, and it works really well for a lot of people. And as I grew in my maturity as a coach, I just kept on thinking, but we're missing something here. There's a piece of this, and especially in my opinion for the women that I coached, I thought we're not taking into account some of the undercurrents of what it means to be a woman in this business. Now, for some women, that approach works great, but for some, it doesn't. And there just was never a time where we really addressed, from my perspective, that missing link and what that meant. So I decided, after I got laid off, and I decided I was going to do my own personal coaching business. And then I finally reconnected with Peggy because almost a year had gone by, and our messages to each other got lost in the ether. So anything where we had actually tried to get together, we couldn't. There was no way to connect. So finally our messages hit, and it was just at the right time. So we wound up having a call, and she basically offered to be my coach. And I really believe that if you are going to be a coach, you should have a coach, because you need to walk the talk, right? You need to be constantly developing yourself too in that perspective. And when she offered, I was like, yes, this is the right time. This makes perfect sense. And so I brought Peggy on as my integrative spiritual coach because of the journey that I was on with the book. I knew her from our experience from chapter 3. I trusted her, and it just felt like the right thing to do. So I went with it. And I would say because of my design, because of my style, I think that Peggy was really a perfect fit for me because of her ability to just listen, her ability to hold that space, and sometimes just let me keep talking to figure out what I already knew. In some cases, to share a different perspective. There was one call that we had where she actually coached me and my daughter together about a situation that my daughter was having, and she had come to me, and I said, you know what, let's use this time and just bring somebody else into this conversation. And she just went with that flow with me, and I just think that it was an incredible experience. And what I realized is that in comparison to kind of the muscle and hustle drive forward, this coaching was not about, well, what's your number? How are we going to achieve this? Which, has its time and its place. But we talked about, how is your body feeling in response to your stress levels? What comes up for you when you are thinking about certain things? And then how do we know if we're actually releasing the stress that's attached to things, or letting go of some pent up emotions that might be in our bodies that we don't even know about? And that to me was very eye-opening. So that experience with Peggy, coupled with then the More Than Mindset, the meditations, and really, I think that pattern and that focus of becoming present on a more daily basis, all of that together has, it's been life-changing for me. It's changed my belief system around how to approach life to a certain extent. It's changed, I think, my response to certain things. And 2020 has been a heck of a year, right? And there's been some significant losses in my circle of friends and family. And I think because of the mindset coaching and the integrative spirituality coaching, all of that has definitely given me a firmer footing to stand on as these life events have happened.
We have so often said, thank God we have these tools this year.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times we have said that. So let's talk a little bit about what is, like you did talk about the difference that it made in your life. And I kind of want to, I don't know, I want to hear it back from you in your words, because I know what it is in my words. But the actual approach that Peggy uses, that the integrative coaches use, that we also use in meditation and in Self-Healing Masters, what would you say is the biggest difference between that and what you're calling the muscle and hustle? Is it the actual integration? Is it because it took you inside of yourself? Is it because it was about more attaining presence, or more about not telling? I wrote this down too. It's like what I already knew without telling me what to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say, in my words, what really works in this space is the PUN of the punchline, right? Like that's really what it is: the presence, the unveiling, and the navigating. And with that, for me, it's like when I feel myself now kind of bubbling up or getting upset or feeling like, oh, I'm going to be upset about this text I got or whatever. I'm like, no, just like come into presence, unveil it. Like, what are your thoughts? My thoughts are just those crazy things that are happening in my mind right now. They're not really who I am. They're just my program that's running. And then how do I navigate that and create the right patterns, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do I have the neurons fire the right way so that I can come from a place of freedom and love and happiness instead of scarcity and fear? And for a long time, I think in my book, I talk a lot about kind of being in survival mode for many years, post divorce, trying to figure out my life, navigating this corporate career, having 3 children and, getting them to their events, making sure my career is on track, running a household, making sure everyone has good food, getting the sports events like that. And again, that's the muscle and hustle for a daily grind for parents, right? And in 2020, it's a little bit different because in some ways we've slowed down, but in other ways we have like all these different ways of having to manage and do. So the hustle doesn't stop. It just looks different. So again, I think like that whole approach in coaching with the learning to navigate things differently, changing the wiring of the mind, right? The mind is malleable. I've studied meditation for a long time, and the mind is a malleable tool. And when we start to really think about and retrain it with the right programming, then we can handle what happens in our lives so much easier. And so again, that daily practice with the meditation and having a group to do that with too, where we share our experiences and then, can understand and integrate it into our lives in a different way, where we debrief. I think that's a phenomenal gift that you're giving that community.
Yeah. So what Candy's talking about is she's done private coaching with one of the integrative life coaches that's been through the program, and that brought her into the world. But every Monday through Friday, we do a morning meditation, which is just a 20-minute meditation, but we have a kind of settling in, and then the meditation, and then a discussion afterwards. And what we're doing is we're embodying the practice.
Mm-hmm.
So we're bringing it into the material world so we can go out in there into the dropping or slipping into this like really deep well of presence, and then we're bridging it back to this time and space. And there's something beautiful that happens in that integration. And I'm with you. I think it's because it's the PUN in practice. It's the actual punchline approach in the meditation practice, and we're doing it consistently. So we've rewritten the neural pathways, right, to align with that. And Self-Healing Masters is a container for personal growth, for self-healing, where we've created a community. We have live coach calls. We have different topics that we discuss. We've got a lot of amazing people in there who bring a lot to the table. With that, I'm going to go into the difference. I do want to talk about divorce, because I want to talk about change, belief, possibilities, potential. And so let's just kind of brief through that. And then I want to get to a little bit about human design and the difference that has made.
Sure. So, divorce, change, belief, possibilities, and potential. Whew, okay. We could talk for 2 hours on this alone, probably. So I'll try to be brief. So I think, first of all, that relationships are under a lot of stress is in 2020 again, right? 2020 is just a different kind of year. We're spending either an incredibly increased amount of time together, or we are learning and we're learning new things about each other in that space. So, all right, so you're going to have to walk me through the whole acronym, because I didn't write it all down. But so first of all, the change, I think when there's people who are entertaining divorce in their minds, or they want their relationship to look and feel different, or they're hitting different types of relationship dissatisfaction at the moment. And that change is so scary. So my divorce is 8 years ago. So I'm out of the woods from that initial step. But watching even some of my friends go through this right now, sometimes all you need to do is just talk through it, journal about it, figure it out, right? Figure out what you know and what you don't know. And maybe it's fine. Maybe it's just a conversation. But then for some people, when they talk with their partner and make that decision to make the split, I think that it just creates this incredible sense of fear, right? Because there's the hurt, there's the fear. What is it going to look like? I don't know. Can I survive this? Are we going to be friendly? Can we be amicable? Is it going to be contentious? And it's all of the unknowns that go into that space. And without going into kind of my whole specific situation, I would share that ours was not the friendliest, and that created a long-term survival mode, which for me personally put me in a constant reactionary state, where it was hard for me to come into presence. It was hard for me to do anything other than like jump every time something happened. And so I think for people who are going through this experience right now, something important to remember is that fear is something that can be navigated. It absolutely can be navigated. And hopefully you are in a relationship with somebody that if you're both feeling like divorce is what the next step is, or some type of major family change is what's in store, that you can navigate that together. But that's not always the case.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like the change brings up all of those beliefs. I'm living in our bridge, or whatever, roof over my head. I can't do this by myself. This is and then we go into the worst case scenario of what's that going to look like? What's that separation going to look like, right? And grieve that life that was.
Exactly. And then I think too, like one of the, I write this in the book too, because it's these thoughts that we don't talk about, right? And it's like, well, am I ever going to be loved again? Well, was I ever properly loved? What did I do wrong? Do I not deserve love? Should I bother getting Botox? Am I being vain if I want Botox now because I need to look good? Should I put myself back on the market? Like what? And it's everything else too. Like, oh, should I get the mommy makeover? Should I go do this? I'm going to have to work out all the time if I want to get back dating. And it's like, oh my gosh, all these things because of the 30, 40, 50 years of messages that we've been sent. That's where our mind goes. Mm-hmm. And so I think, again, it goes back to the PUN, like, wait a second, like, what do I need to do for my journey into my own soul to make sure my soul is healed before I worry about Botox and waxing and anything else?
Yeah, because exactly, like, The change brings up the beliefs. The limiting beliefs block the potential and possibility. So if
Yes.
you can do the PUN and just, so I'll let you kind of talk on that because this is your thing. But that, I mean, that's why I was kind of like trying to bring up those words in that order. It's because one like brings the next, brings the next, brings the next, and we have to figure out a way to navigate or shift through that. And I feel like we have a beautiful framework or process in order to help
Absolutely.
others walk through.
Well, and I think too, one thing that strikes me is, for me, it was someone, I went to a talk and someone said this, the dash between what was and what will be, right? And as I thought about all of that in that seminar that I was in that day, I talked about it being from fear to freedom for me. It was, I was living in this constant fear of, I failed, I'm failing. What if my kids aren't going to be happy? My kids aren't going to love me. His whole family hates me. My family hates me. You know, I was brought up very religious. So it was like all of this stuff and worrying about making sure everyone else was okay with my divorce when I needed to just really worry about what I needed in the moment. And I think getting through that dash, that limbo space, and then realizing like, okay, I'm okay. I did the best I could with the information that I had when I had it. And now here I am today, and I'm going to be present every moment that I possibly can and live my best life now. And that's where I think that freedom starts to come in. And it's an imperfect journey, right? That's not a straight line where things keep going better and better. That's I'm going to have my good days and my bad days. But to not get attached to either the drama of it and not get attached to the highs of it, knowing that it all evens out over time, I think is important.
Yeah, and there is someone listening who's in this exact position of the change, bringing up the scary beliefs. What would you say to that person that's sitting on the, like right on the if of it?
Yeah, so I would say if you're sitting on the edge of whether or not you should get a divorce, first of all, only you can make that choice. And I think that don't listen to what your best friend says, what your mom says, what your sister says, what your guy friends say. Like, spend a little time alone, really thinking about what that means to you and what it is. Have the conversation with your partner. So first of all, I would say only you can make that decision. And then the second thing that I would say is, if you are going to go through that, if you don't have a prenup in place, the law of your state is what your divorce prenup is. So for example, in Wisconsin, it's a 50-50 state. Well, I don't have a prenup, so everything is just 50-50, boom, done. There's no need to fight. Like, this is what it looks like. This is what it is. And so if you can somehow take the emotion out of it and just know that this is what it looks like. Now, I have some very good friends who are divorce lawyers, and I don't mean any disrespect to them in their profession, but they're in that profession to make money, right? That's what they do. That's what we all are, you know, trying to make a living. And I think that there are, in some cases, some divorce lawyers who really prey on the fears of others. And instead of staying in that fear space, like try to remove yourself from it and just think through logically what you wanted to do. And then if that is the path that you're deciding to go down, after you've tried everything, you've done your therapy work, you've really tried to communicate with your partner, you're trying to make things work, you've decided that it's not for you, you're in that space, then I would say start to cast the vision of what your future looks like. What do you want that to be? Create a vision board. Think about, so one of the things that I did for myself, and people might think I'm nuts, but I said in my mind, I want to imagine someday where my new partner and I and my ex's partner with him can come together and do holidays with the kids, and we're fine and we're friends. That is not where we were. We're still not there. Maybe someday we will be. And that's okay, because that just is. And I also think that that's a function of both me and him. I don't want to lay blame on any one person. That is, it takes two people to figure out how to couple and uncouple as we go through life. And but I think casting that vision, or saying, you know what, I've always wanted to have a home in the country, and we've lived our whole lives in the city. We'll start to think about what that looks like and what that means, and paint that picture. And once you have that, it starts making that scary stuff not so scary, because you can start making decisions in that direction, and hopefully take steps to where that vision leads.
Yeah, And it comes back to the presence, unveiling the limiting beliefs, navigating back to neutrality, then create the vision, then take the how-to steps. It still fits in the framework. And really it's about managing our mind and our emotions. How can we self-soothe that emotional stuff that's bubbling up and then come into the situation with neutrality? It's almost like you said, like it's almost like at that point business, like you got to be able to take the personal part out of it and look at the facts.
And I would say it's impossible to dream when you're in survival mode.
Ugh.
If you're just constantly in survival mode, trying to like make things happen, it's going to create absolute exhaustion in you and complete energetic imbalance. And you're not going to be able to really think fully about and see your future and really think about what it means to live fully as you are. And so I believe it's really important to just take the time, if that's the path that you are on, take the time to respect and love yourself through that. Heal the wounds that you are uncovering, because you're going to uncover some wounds in this space that you didn't know that you had. And whatever they are, like just take the time to process, grieve them. The emotions are going to ebb and flow and come and go through years. Like I said, this is a journey. And that vision that you ultimately paint for yourself might show up in a year, 10 years, 15 years. You don't know. But at least then you have something that you're dreaming for again, and you can take the steps toward it.
Alrighty. Let's talk about discovering human design. This is something we do in Self-Milling Masters also. It's like we really want to identify that natural essence that's within all of us, that's beyond the conditioning. So we've been conditioned our entire lives, the way we think, the way the way it's supposed to be, like what you said earlier, even like our beliefs about divorce and religion and family and friends and all of that stuff is really, that's why so many of us are caught up in this emotional spin, because there's an underlying emotional manipulation of a way that you're supposed to be, and if you don't follow the rules, then you will be shunned, right? And that's really what the humans fear, because we don't want to be alone, we don't want to be disconnected, we don't want to not be loved. That's our greatest fear, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about where you were, which was in a really good place, but it feels like what happened is when you came in, you like, shoom, you just launched through this awareness.
So when I started working with Peggy, Peggy said, I want you to think about joining Self-Healing Masters. And I was like, oh boy, I don't know. I got to really think about what am I doing and where am I allocating my money, and where am I, and it's the old money stories. Am I worth investing a little bit more in myself? I don't know. And through multiple conversations with Peggy, and then kind of starting to meet the people who were in the group, I was like, you know what, I'm doing this. I'm going to make the call. I'm going to invest in myself. This feels like it's the right next step, and I'm going to do it. Like, I'm in. And when I came in, it was on a day that you were offering the calls about an initial coaching call. And I thought, well, this is serendipitous. Like, then I'll just have another call and I'll get to know Kim a little bit, so I'll understand more about what this is about. And in that call, prior to the call, you asked me for my birth information. And when I got on the call with you, you said, do you know you're a reflector? And I was like, well, no, I don't even really know what that means. Like, help me understand. And so this was, I think, maybe the beginning of a new awakening for me, or like my next level of awakening on this journey, because this never ends, right? This is a lifetime of learning. But one of the things that, you began to ask me questions and say, tell me about what you're doing. So I told you about this book, and I told you about how I wanted to go and write, and I couldn't help but then reflect and share my life's lessons and share some poignant moments about life and learnings along the way. And then as we continued on, one of your comments to me was, you realize when you were writing, you're in your divine essence. And that struck me. Like, I've mentioned that a few times too, like that just struck me on such a soul level. And I thought, oh my gosh. And it's the truth, because when I was on that road trip in writing, I have never felt so inspired and free. And just to be present and I was alone. So whether I was alone for hours in my car, or I met somebody and I spent an hour talking to him or her, I've never felt so just in my element, right? It was incredible.
I got the goosebumps.
And
It's so good when you know you're where you're supposed to be.
yeah, and then but then it's like, but what am I supposed to do with this? What does that mean? I don't know how all this works and comes together. And for being a reflector, I'm a 1-3 reflector, which means investigative martyr, which means I need lots of information in order to understand things. That's my nature. I want to know the big picture, the context. And then I want to make sure that I'm having all of the experiences that go along with this. And my signature state is to be in a state of like flow and surprise. When I'm feeling surprised, I know I'm on the right path. And when I'm feeling ultimately disappointed in something, then I know something needs to change. And so just that, and a basic awareness of that for me was so eye-opening. And when I was in corporate, before I got laid off, I'd be on teams where I'd say, but I want the big picture. Help me understand the context so I can get this. And people would look at me like, just do your job, like just get this done. And I'm like, but I can't just get this done unless I know all of it. And now I'm like, oh, I'm built that way. That's what I need to actually do work. Or to be reflectors have a better, we do a better job when we have things to react to because we need to reflect back about them. So then I'm thinking back into corporate where people would say, well, just go take an hour and go create something and bring it back. And I'd be like, but what I can't, like, I need something to respond to. So I'd spend the first 20 or 30 minutes gathering, input so that I could take a look at all that and then create whatever happens next. Which, sometimes was great work and sometimes wasn't great work because I didn't have the things to reflect to. But in hindsight now, as I'm looking back, that's incredible. And another thing for me to think about is when I was going through my divorce and I was like, I just kept thinking, I just need time. Like I need the time to think through this and process it. And reflectors need 28 and a half days or a lunar cycle to make big decisions. We have to feel all the different phases of the moon. Basically, we need to feel all of those transits. And I think back to that time and how pressured I felt to make a decision, and I couldn't just make a snap decision, which for some people became a real disappointment. Like, why can't you say you're all in on your marriage? I'm like, well, we're talking about divorce and I need to really feel what this means. Well, why can't you say you want a divorce? I'm like, because I really don't want a divorce. Like I want to stay married. I have to think through it and really feel through it. And now in hindsight, again, that makes sense why my approach was that way. But I felt so pressured to be what everyone else expected.
Yeah. And that's our open head and root. It's like this constant pressure and anxiety. And in Self-Healing Masters, we have another reflector. So immediately I was like, oh my God, like you guys are the center of this. It's like because I want you to reflect back what's happening here. What are you feeling? What's coming? And it's like, I'm always asking you and Sandy questions. And that probably would make a fun show is just to do a live with just you two and do a kind of Q&A for others because it's only 1% of the population. And for those who are not in More Than Mindset yet, you guys need to come over because that's where we do these kinds of interviews. So what I'll do is pull up, we'll do a call on each one, on the generator, on the manifestor, on the reflector, as well as the projector. And there will be only those on the call to have that conversation, that'll be interviewed to have the conversation. Because how did it feel to be able to relate, like you were understood and had someone else that you can connect with? Could you share that experience?
Absolutely. So I think for the first time, maybe in many, many years, I felt seen. And I just felt like, okay, you can show up as who you are and you don't have to say anything. You don't have to chime in. You can just be and understand and pick up what's going on. And when the time is right, you can chime in. And if that takes 28.5 days, it takes 28.5 days. And I think that from that being seen was, first of all, like that was a miracle in itself. And then to know, I think just to know that there's this culture in this community where everybody is willing to explore that together. So if you're a generator and you're living in that space and you're, understanding what your authority is and testing that out, you can share that with a group of people who are there to say, oh, now I can relate to that and I understand, and have that same language, right? So I think that's a really cool thing that's happening in the community of Self-Healing Masters. And so for me too, I would say being seen is one thing, being accepted then kind of as I am. And then these doors have opened where I now have like, I'm being connected to other reflectors who have common interests, and we're talking about different things. I just had a reach out from somebody who said, I want a reflector coach. Like, please, can you work? Can you work?
Yes.
I said, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about what that means and what that looks like. I have a very dear friend who is a coach and a speaker, and she said she just wanted to dial back from her work for the rest of this year to really kind of think and reset for 2021. And she's like, I don't know if I have the words for what I want. And I said, well, try me. Like, try it. Let's just talk about it. Let's talk through it. And I got done listening to everything she was saying, and I said, can I reflect back to you what I'm hearing you say? And I did. And she said, that's exactly what I was trying to say. You just gave me the words so that I can do my next phase of my business. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, all right. So there's some magic here that when we just let ourselves be who we are, it's so much easier to just breathe and live and feel that magic.
And the simplicity of that ease is so hard to get the mind to settle down and agree to. That's the work. That's the practice. We already have that activated in us, and it's like whenever we surrender to the pressure, to that push, that urgency that the world loves, because I even can tell you this from so I'm an emotional generator, and I have to go through all the emotions because I don't make a decision on the spot, and I'm okay with that. But people around me are not okay with that. They want to know now. They want to know what it's going to look like. They want to know, my husband wants to know what I want to eat before the waiter does, because he gets embarrassed. And I'm like, I'm actually fine. We'll just make sure we go to Mexican, make sure there's some chips and salsa to keep him quiet, while I'm deciding, or a little drink or whatever. But for years, it was a fight. It was a battle of that not having permission to take the time. And I don't know about you, I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with me, but when I've made the decision, when I wasn't ready, I've always regretted it.
Yeah, I would say there's some regret, or there are lessons there that I would not have otherwise had to have learned. Some negative things have happened, oh my gosh, what if we had just waited to do something a little different? 100%.
Yeah. The few things that because I take a long time to just now, the last few years to really sit in it, but the few things that I made a decision because someone else was kind of pressuring me to do it, I'm really having to still do the mindset around not trusting myself, because by that point I knew, and I still got tripped up by it. And I'm saying that for all of you to know, you will still get tripped up. But if you take it back to punchline proof, you take it back to that PUN over and over and over, and then the whole punchline approach, it will lead you back to yourself.
Yeah. And the other thing about being a reflector and what I'm learning is that we have the undying need and desire to see the best in people. And that's part of having all of our centers open too. So not only are we typically more empathic because of that, but it's like, oh, you wouldn't believe the best in people. And I'm a part of a group of reflectors now where I'm hearing their conversation. I'm a little new, so I'm not like totally jumping right into the whole conversation, but I'm hearing the things that they're saying, and I'm like, yes, 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 which is why in relationships too, you can fall so easily into believing and loving the potential of somebody rather than who they actually are and who they want to be. Or if they project their situations and issues, if you will, onto you, you can be, as a reflector, more absorbent of those and think that they're your own. And it's just, as I'm hearing everybody's stories, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, again, it just triggers so much for me in my life about things that I have experienced. And I thought it was just because I was different in some way, or I was weird, or, but actually there's a subset of us in the world who are experiencing many of these things that way.
Yeah. Those open centers, it's like, it's so not ours. It's not us, but it's where we act from. Mm-hmm. That we don't recognize. And that's the awareness that we're getting to, is like really taking ourselves back to, actually, that's just something that you're regurgitating, it's something that's passing through that you're reacting to. But once you know how to manage your mind and manage your emotions, then you can kind of see it and allow it to pass through. But I'm kind of like you with the part that I think it was a game changer for me to be able to accept myself and see that we are all unique. You're really not going to find anyone else who has the same exact chart, that has the same exact design. Even if we're all reflectors or all projectors or all generators and you're in that group, it's still not going to be the same because it's so minutely specific.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think also it gives you the opportunity to really study it and see if it resonates with you. Like you've said all the time along the way, like this doesn't need to be like your only lens that you live life through, period, done, end of story, but it just gives you one more sort of, it's one more door you can walk through when you're learning on your journey of life. And to study it and really look at, like you said, there's so much detail on there, but to really, really look at it and think about and meditate on how does it apply to your life, I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to do, to experience.
It's, I'm always saying that because I feel like we get attached to the next dogma. The mind loves, like the intellect just wants to get, it just wants to know. We will never know. We will never, never, never know what, if there is a truth or what, because it changes according to our perception, right? And I love this stuff and I bring it in, but then I would watch clients go away. Like they would go down these rabbit holes and take on this new label or this new dogma. And I'm like so protective of you guys having a clear mind, and being careful that this doesn't become the next religion or the next, even science, right? Science is meant to question.
Right.
And,
right.
and whatever they bring up will be questioned again. I see life as just being curious and wondering and inquiring.
Right. Well, and it's about experimenting with it. And I think I'll just share one of the stories, since knowing that I'm a reflector and trying to pay more attention, kind of watch for the signs, be in the flow. Like my true purpose is inspired by the gene keys and everything, so that like to have the patience and wait and really see how things unfold, which is a complete departure from the muscle and hustle life, complete departure. And so, I'm trying to just watch for signs. And I found a video about a reflector who, she had experienced what she was sharing, what her experiences had been. And so I found her on Instagram and I sent her a message. I was like, hey, I'm a reflector too. And she's like, no way. Like, so we started messaging each other. Well, I'm actually doing yoga teacher training with her and her husband now. So I was like, this kind of all unfolded and it was the right sign and the right thing to do. So through a series of events, I made that decision. And then I'm doing these, as we all do, kind of some networking Zoom meetings. And an old colleague of mine had said, I want you to come out to see the building that I bought and I want you to see the lower level. And I was like, okay, sounds good. So we went out, had a lovely conversation. And then he showed me the lower level and it's this beautiful space of hardwood floors and high ceilings with these industrial looking chandeliers and lots of natural light. And they had the kitchen remodeled so they can do food things and events in there. And he said, really what we want to do is rent this out to a yoga instructor when the time is right. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like how did this all come together? Because we had talked about in our first conversation, maybe working together again at some point in the future, but I thought it would be kind of in our old financial services way, like running paperwork. I said, I'll answer your phones Friday afternoon. Sure, no problem. And then that happened. And I was like, well, who knows? But incredible how those signs and the doors, just when you watch for them, they start to open.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to end on this because I see we're getting close to time, but I think it's so important because I'm experiencing it for the last few years myself, but it's that exactly what you just said. It's that waiting. It's going from, in meditation, we call this the difference between the football feel and like the quantum feel, where we're in, like, we have plays all laid out. We have the, the plans, we have that push and rub, or like you call it, the muscle and hustle, no matter what our position is, right? Even if we're in the stands, we're like still rooting. And then we have this being. So we have this doing world and this being world. You've been in both. Now you've been, I'll say, hypnotized to work this way. You've been conditioned.
Yep, absolutely.
And then you had this huge transformation, this new life. And now you have all of this new information, new experience, a whole new container to learn in, to be in, which is what I think we do in Self-Healing Masters. It's a place to come and practice your design so you can get comfortable with it before bringing it out. And how do you, or what would you tell someone else who is right here in between where you are, where you know to wait, but you're feeling impatient.
Mhm.
Your mind is telling you you're crazy, don't do it, no, no, no. And then your inner essence is like, yeah, we're just gonna chill out and wait.
So I think the first thing that comes to mind is that there is freedom on the other side of that fear. There is absolute freedom on the other side of fear. And right now in this moment, like yesterday morning, I got a LinkedIn notification for like what would look like the perfect job for me, and based on, my certifications and my history. And I looked at it and I'm like, I should probably apply. I should probably do it because of health insurance needs and, whatever, all the things that we tell ourselves. And instead I had to pause and I'm like, who's giving me that message right now? Like, what is that? That's my old programming. That's all of the old programming. So instead I kind of pondered for a little bit, kind of sat in silence, and I'm like, no, I have committed right now to follow this design. And I know for a fact, if I go into some type of a corporate setting, I, I will not be happy. I can muscle and, I can push out the work. I know that I can be a generator. I can do all of that stuff, but I'm not going to feel the happiness and the satisfaction that I feel right now. And if I am truly investing in myself, success doesn't just magically happen overnight. So even if my bank account looks different, if I'm judging success on a monetary scale right now, which is not my personal definition of success, but let's face it, we live in a world where it's important to have an income. But if I'm looking at that, I'll say I really should probably go back to work, right? Like, because I'm not in the same space that I once was. But oh my gosh, the things that are not monetary, I am so much happier with, including myself, my well-being, my health, time with my kids. I used to leave my house every morning on my way to my corporate job saying, gosh, we all pay a lot of money for our homes that we're never in. We spent 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week in a different building. And we're like, have this mortgage and property taxes for a home that like it sits empty the majority of the time. We just sleep in it. That's crazy. And so now I'm really like settling in, and I'm so grateful. I'm just so grateful for the moments and the connections that are being made and the doors that are opening over time. And that to me feels much more like more successful. That to me is more important and I'm more calm and peaceful in that than I ever would have been before.
It's so interesting watching the two dialogues, the intellect and the inner essence. And I mean, our intellect, our mind thinks it's so smart, like it's so looking out for us, and it tells you like all the things that just tell you about what you should watch for. And then when you aren't aware, it's just you don't even drop down. You don't even drop down to consider that there could be something else, right?
Right.
The beauty is, like, especially with the waiting, if you truly trust life, and that job is meant to be, it will be there and it will be clearer, right? You'll have something to respond to. You have something to, like, I think that's the hardest part is, can we trust doing it this new way in ease, doing it aligned with our design, doing it as this new identity or a new perception of who we are. But to say that's easy when this thing does not stop chattering, if it wouldn't chatter, it wouldn't be a problem though, right?
Right. And it's trying to keep it safe. It's just working from an old program. It's like we just have to allow for that old program to circuit out and get an upgrade. Like we just need
put her in the back seat, put the seatbelt on, right? Just sometimes you got to put her in the trunk. It's like, okay, you can rattle on, but you're going to have to do it in timeout, or you're going to have to do it here.
Right.
It's,
right. And just to actively trust, like you said, that, and that's been a big theme the last couple of months, to just like, I'm going to trust what happens next. And even if my old story is feeling a little like, oh gosh, we're getting worked up. No, like, relax. There's not been one day that I haven't been fully provided for yet.
Oh.
So
what did you come up with in meditation the other day? It was the current of the
river of calm. The river of calm, I think is what I said. And it was just like, my best friend one of my best friends committed suicide, and one of my two family members died, one unexpectedly and one that was anticipated. And all of those things, I think, even had those things happened a year ago, I would have been like just on this huge emotional wave. And so while those emotions came, there was also this underlying, like the river of calm that was like, no, but this is okay. This is the cycle of human life. Um, there is good and bad with every situation. And if I can stay in that river of calm and just trust that the next right thing is going to happen, and I just keep making the next best right choice for me based on what unfolds, like that's magical. And there's so much beauty in that.
Mhm. I want to end here because it's such a beautiful place. These tools are fabulous. Like in order to really maintain calm, ease, flow, if that's what you're looking for in your life, I do believe that this is the process, this is the approach, the framework that makes the difference. I want to thank you for coming on, sharing your book. We're going to link how to find you and how to get the book in the show notes, below. And is there anything that I did not ask you that you want to share that has to do with the book or your experience or?
I would just say, just believe in the magic and embrace the goddess that you are.